Guardians of the Galaxy is a film I was a bit unsure of walking into it. I was a huge comic fan since I was young, but admittedly I had never known much about this team besides a passing knowledge of Rocket Raccoon from videos talking about Marvel's strange talking raccoon. That said, I think there was a lot of anticipation in the air for the then upcoming Star Wars The Force Awakens film, so for me, I figured we would at least get a taste of some goofy sci-fi while we waited. However, I think, like pretty much anyone else who is even marginally a fan of Marvel properties, I was sold on James Gunn's new quirky take on this borderline unknown team that had very little to actually scrape off of, because even at that time, this was a new iteration of the characters, with the team starting as Star-Lord's Kree Squad in 2007 during the Annihilation event, then officially as the Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy 1 from May of 2008. Regardless, we'll talk more about that later, but Marvel took a big risk and it definitely paid off, with the franchise becoming one of Marvel's most popular franchises of recent years, as evident by the fact that you can buy Guardians of the Galaxy shampoo, toothpaste, and cereal, with entries being fairly sporadic since this film's release in 2014. Not many characters get that kind of hype that they're able to maintain even at points when their film series are on hiatus, other than superheroes that are pop culture icons like Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man. In 2010, Kevin Feige started kicking around the idea of some more obscure properties coming to the MCU, citing the recent Guardians of the Galaxy revamp as something that interested him. Following this, he said he wanted to take the MCU cosmic and have multiple coalescing universes, so to speak, that would culminate in a potential future film. By 2012, though, it was officially announced, with the team's lineup being announced as Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Drax, and Gamora. James Gunn, who ultimately got the project, pitched against other directors like Peyton Reed, who would eventually do the Ant-Man trilogy, and Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who would eventually direct the first Captain Marvel film. Around this time, Joss Whedon signed on as creative consultant for Phase 2 so that he could design a trajectory to his own Avengers sequel, Avengers Age of Ultron. Joss would exit the MCU proper after Phase 2 to go to the competitors at DC in a very ill-fated attempt at the Justice League. You can see my retrospective on that film on my channel. But all this is to say that Joss actually really backed Gunn and thought his vision was awesome, leading to the director's big break in the superhero genre. Nicole Perlman was working with Marvel in a screenwriting boot camp they had to develop talent, and would lead her to writing the concepts of Guardians, writing almost a dozen drafts between 2009 and 2011, even considering doing her take on the original Guardians before moving to the revamped version. Star-Lord would be revamped into a pseudo-Han Solo character, and she thought using old pop music would be a good play for the film. Her draft, however, was pretty much gutted when James Gunn joined the project, with Gunn creating a wholly new story. Some of the characteristics of the characters were remixed, and he added the Walkman as an emotional center to the story. The story starts on the death of Peter Quill, or Star-Lord's mother, who dies of cancer as Peter runs off unsure how to process his emotions, but as he flees the hospital, he's abducted by a spaceship. Years later, Quill sets out to steal a mysterious orb, which just so happens to contain the Power Stone, one of Thanos' Infinity Stones that he needs for his plans. So Thanos sends Ronan the Accuser and his daughters Gamora and Nebula after the artifact. Korath the Pursuer confronts Peter, but Peter manages to escape, hoping to sell the orb, not knowing what is inside, on the planet Xander. This is when he's confronted by Gamora, who takes the orb, and a chase ensues that leads them running into a pair of strange bounty hunters, Rocket and Groot.
Quit smiling, you idiot. You're supposed to be a professional.
Who manage to capture them for a second before the Nova Corps shows up and brings them to jail. Peter quickly makes an alliance with the other three people he was put in there with, since it turns out the orb is worth a lot of money to certain people due to its power. Gamora, however, is captured in jail and brought to Drax, who wants to kill her due to her allegiance with Thanos and Ronan the Accuser. However, Gamora says she can bring him to Ronan, and like that, Drax decides to join the team. The group stage a breakout and manage to run off. Well, Thanos learns of Gamora's defection and orders Nebula and Ronan to track her down and deal with her, and retrieve the Power Stone.
And apparently, you alienated my favorite daughter, Gamora.
The group heads to nowhere to meet the Collector, who they give the stone to, but one of his servants activates it to try to break out of captivity, blowing up the Collector's collection. Gamora steals the stone, and the group finally decide to give the stone to the Nova Corps, but just then Ronan shows up and attempts to capture the stone for Thanos himself. Nebula manages to take the stone, but in the process, the Guardians escape from nowhere. The group formally agrees to take care of Ronan and save the stone.
I will fight beside you. And in the end, see my wife and daughter again.
With them asking Yondu and the Ravengers for help in getting the orb. Yondu agrees, assuming he gets to keep the orb, and they also get the Nova Corps to agree to assist. Ronan's ship arrives on Xandar, and the three factions attempt to stop Ronan and his fleet, but they know that if Ronan can touch down and start messing with stuff from the ground, it could spell an end to Xandar with the Power Stone in his possession. The team eventually makes it onto Ronan's ship as many of the Ravengers and Nova Corps members start being laid to waste. The group confronts Ronan, and the villain is seemingly killed after Rocket crashes a ship into him. The Dark Aster, Ronan's ship, starts free-falling to the surface, and Groot sacrifices himself to protect his new friends. Ronan, however, is on the ground waiting for them, and the group do a Hail Mary attempt to harness the power of the stone, and to everyone's amazement, Quill is able to survive using it, despite him seemingly being immortal. Along with the other Guardians, he manages to destroy Ronan. Peter gives Yondu the orb, though it lacks the stone, and despite being had, Yondu takes some satisfaction knowing he raised Peter to be a hero in his own twisted way. The Nova Corps thanks the team and fixes their ship. The team take off, learning of reports that Peter's father is not actually human, but actually a strange alien, and the group head off officially as the Guardians of the Galaxy. Groot also has started to regrow after Rocket planted part of his friend, with Baby Groot dancing to some Jackson 5 tunes to close out the film. The Guardians of the Galaxy first appeared in Marvel Superheroes number 18 from 1968, though this is technically a version from another Earth, Earth 691, with the main universe versions of the characters being what this is mainly based on. As I said earlier, the team was piloted with Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord 1, but was later officially formed with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 Number 1 from 2008. The team from that book was slightly different, with all the members from the film being on the comic team, along with Mantis, Adam Warlock, and Quasar. The team has kind of had a rough time figuring out what direction it's going to go in the comics, with lots of odd members added over the years like Captain Marvel, Hercules, Super Skrull, Angela, a character from Spawn who got bought by Marvel in a confusing, weird thing, Ant-Man, Beta Ray Bill, Doctor Doom, Iron Man, Kitty Pryde, The Thing, and Venom. I feel like Marvel never really found out how to take these characters and make a successful long-running comic with them. This isn't even to mention the offshoots like the Asgardians of the Galaxy, the Dark Guardians, etc. Peter Quill first appeared in the comics in Marvel Preview number 4 from 1975 as kind of a Flash Gordon character, or perhaps reminiscent of a character like DC's Adam Strange. It wouldn't be till nearly 3 decades later that the character would re-emerge in Thanos 8 from 2004. The character would lead the Guardians of the Galaxy in the comics as well, but is a bit more deadpan in his early history than he is in the film, with Chris Pratt's take having a bit of a lovable goofball feel, something Chris Pratt used a lot coming up in TV shows like Parks and Recreations, and moving forward with the Lego Movie, Super Mario, and Garfield. I don't know. Gamora first appeared in Strange Tales 180 from 1975 and has been most well known as being part of Thanos' house, as his foster daughter, and later as a Guardians of the Galaxy member. She is more or less accurate to the comics. Drax first appeared in Iron Man 55 from 1972 as somewhat of a strange superhero side character for Iron Man. In the film, he's from a planet called Mount Kylos, though in the comics he's a human named Arthur Douglas who was driving from LA to Las Vegas, and when in the desert between the two cities, Thanos basically just passed by and killed his family for fun. Then the origin gets weird. He gets his consciousness and soul put into a body made out of dirt, which causes him to come to life as Drax by an Eternal. Anyways, the film cut all that crap and just made him some dude mad at Ronan for killing his family, just to kind of simplify things and explain why he is where he is. Groot as a concept kind of sort of originated in Tales to Astonish 13 from 1960, and as the cover said, he's the monster from Planet X. Groot's name actually derives from the old Marvel trope of just writing nonsense on comic book covers that kind of looks cool. It was something Stan Lee and his brother Larry Lieber did with Jack Kirby in the time before the superhero revival of the 1960s at Timely. For example, in Tales to Astonish 9, a Godzilla-like monster named Jeroom the Living Lizard was created, Gorgilla the giant gorilla from issue 12, Thor with 2 R's from issue 16, or Moomba from issue 23. The first 34 issues of the title, pretty much every issue would be like that until Ant-Man took over the book, and it was a strange book at the time. The Groot we all know and love, though, first appeared in Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord #1 and was created by the Gardener along with his Groot brothers. Rocket Raccoon was created in Incredible Hulk 271, and he was a gun-toting raccoon that could talk. That is what he is in the film too. The origin is a bit different, but the idea is similar. Ronan the Accuser, or just Ronan, is a Kree executioner who kills people with a big hammer, pretty much unchanged for this film. The character originated in Fantastic Four 65 from 1967, and he would fight people like the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and the Inhumans, and then occasionally the Guardians of the Galaxy later on. Yondu started off as a founding member of the original Guardians of the Galaxy from the 29th century, appearing in the team's first appearance in Marvel Superheroes number 18. This version from the film is somewhat of an original take, with Yondu in the comics basically being a Guardians version of Captain America leading the Guardians of the Galaxy. That said, this version would later be adapted into the comics in Star-Lord #1 from 2015, being a character that is an ancestor long removed from the original character, and is more reminiscent of the version we see in the film being a gruff leader of the Ravengers. Are you tired of me explaining characters yet? Well, strap in, here's some more. Nebula first appeared in Avengers 257 from 1985, being the sister of Gamora, kind of her niece though too. It's weird. She was the granddaughter of Thanos, but was later adopted by him. She would be more evil for much of her history, again like Gamora though, she's fairly accurate here. Korth the Pursuer works with Ronan and was the character that works in Kree circles. Korath first appeared in Quasar 32 from 1991. Quasar was always my least favorite Marvel comic. I had a bunch of these in a quarter bin, just straight trash, nothing too exciting here, but he appeared here as well. Roman Day, the goofy Nova guy played by John C. Reilly, was the original Nova Prime, which is the leader of the Nova Corps from their first appearance in Nova #1 from 1976. He would choose Richard Rider, the original Nova, and gave him his power. The Nova Corps is more or less DC's Green Lantern Corps, but most of them aren't super powerful. I think this was just kind of hinting at Nova proper showing up in the MCU at some point, but to this day that is yet to fully come to fruition. The Collector first appeared in this film following an end credits scene in Thor the Dark World. In the comics, he first appeared as a background character in Avengers 26, before a full appearance in Avengers 28 from 1966. The Collector is an ancient god that, well, collects things. That really doesn't change between the films and the comics, though the character started as an antagonist before becoming a supporting neutral party. Cosmo the Dog was another cameo, first appearing in Nova Volume 4 number 8 from 2007. It was a blink and you miss it cameo, but he's a dog. Howard the Duck briefly appeared in cameos and is most well known at this point for his really shitty movie from the 1980s. But the character was actually kind of a fan favorite for a good minute back in the 70s and 80s after first appearing in Fear 19, with a full first appearance in Man-Thing #1 from 1973. Thanos has his first full appearance in films here. It's not too deep, but he shows up. The character first appeared in Iron Man 55 from 1972 and would go on to be a major player and antagonist for the larger Marvel Universe. He is really only here to further explain the concept of Infinity Stones and to have a reason for Gamora and Nebula to be in the plot of this film, though the seeds are starting to grow a bit for what the climax of the Infinity Saga would be down the line when he's the villain of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Star-Lord was the lead in this film, and following his mother's death joined the Ravengers, which was led by Yondu, and is sort of the proto-Guardians but perhaps a little scummier. Following his mission to steal the orb, Peter finally gets his chance at having his own team that eventually evolves into his sort of new family to help fill the large void in his heart left by the death of his mother and the fact that he never knew his father. As this trilogy goes on, the idea of family and Peter's relationship with others is explored further than it was here, but that longing and loneliness in Peter's life, who grew up around a pack of savage, if deep down not the most evil, bandits, is something he tries to work through.
Billions of people will perish.
Is that what you've been filling your head with, boy? Sentiment? Eating away your brain like maggots?
Something I think has a hopeful outlook following the Guardians' victory and ascension into the wider universe after defeating Ronan and his evil army. This film also starts building Peter's romance with Gamora, a love that is much truer than Manslet Peter is perhaps used to having. Speaking of Gamora, she's the daughter of Thanos, who ultimately joins the Guardians, seeing that they're assets to help her defend and hide the orb, knowing her adoptive father would be able to use the orb and the Power Stone to cause massive amounts of destruction if it fell into his hands, or more specifically his gauntlet. Her relationship with Peter doesn't go far in this film, but her heart of stone from the first act of this film starts cracking a bit towards the end. Nebula is the muscle in this movie. Not literally, she's actually quite small, but she's still a deadly threat and less confident in her morals than Gamora, and is a puppet of her adopted father Thanos. She gains more confidence and importance to the story of Guardians of the Galaxy as the MCU continues to unfold, but here she's in this film to be the heavy or the mini boss, if you know what I'm saying. Drax joins the Guardians, last of the whole team, joining up on the prison satellite. Drax is on a quest to avenge his family since Ronan killed them. Ronan says he doesn't recall them having killed so many people in his years, a contrast to Drax, who has dedicated his life to killing Ronan.
I don't recall killing your family. I doubt I'll remember killing you either.
It isn't until he and the Guardians unite that he finally sees vengeance, gaining a new family that accepts his odd quirks in the process, though it seems his thirst for vengeance can't be fully quelled with him mentioning Thanos is next at the end of the film. He's a goofball. Love this character. Rocket Raccoon, or just Rocket, is a psychopath gun-toting raccoon. He compensates heavily for a lonely and sad past that isn't explained until Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but there's an obvious level of trust he places on no one but his buddy Groot, until he meets this group of odd characters and he finds himself entangled with their world and eventually starts trusting them. Groot is Rocket's best friend and sort of the Guardians of the Galaxy's equivalent to Chewbacca from Star Wars, a non-English speaking muscle who is loyal to the end and even sacrifices his own life to protect his best friend Rocket and his new friends he made during the journey. Like the Turritopus Dorni, or the immortal jellyfish, Rocket was able to plant a Groot stick who asexually created a clone of himself. A happy tear-welling ending. I didn't cry, but come on, how can you not come close? It's a cute-ass ending. Ronan is the villain, and while he's big and brooding and scary, with a unique design, I won't lie and say he's all that deep. He's just a super big power hammer wielding warlord that acts as an enforcer for the ultra powerful Thanos. That said, I thought it was cool when Drax wanted him dead and Ronan is like, who the hell are you? It just shows a scale to Ronan's power and crimes that makes some real stakes and makes this villain feel like he's really lived some shit, despite not being the most well laid out character. I think he's just a tad flat like a lot of these Marvel villains, but he's cool, he's threatening. Yondu is the final character I want to talk about. He's Peter's adoptive parental figure, though he came over Peter through villainous means, kidnapping the boy from Peter's father, then growing fond of the boy, making him a scoundrel like him and his pirate crew. Yondu proves to have something of a heart, though. He collects some trinkets, and after learning Peter gave him the orb empty and kept the Infinity Stone to give to Nova Prime, he was proud of his boy taking some of his, thievish, awful traits and using them for good. When I went into this film, I was hoping that the film would quench my thirst for the Star Wars franchise that had been dry as a bone theatrically since Revenge of the Sith, minus that bad Clone Wars film that was a pilot for the good Clone Wars TV show. And in a way, it did quench that thirst, but at the same time, this space opera, while definitely having Star Wars quirks and the tonal balance of fun and darkness that made the original trilogy so unique, it had its own perks, making it very unique and not feel very Star Wars-ish. Creatively, with the properties of the Marvel Universe and the diversity of themes it could take, tying into the Avengers franchise, all made it feel unique, while also having a unique look at the things that made Star Wars so great. What we got wasn't Star Wars, it was kind of the Marvel equivalent though. And while that could be obnoxious and weird in the wrong hands, James Gunn proved to be the man to bring such a story to life for us to view. Tonally, it just feels so unique, intimate, funny, and heartwarming, and it is sort of the best of both worlds, boiled into a fun, crazy action film. The score was done by Tyler Bates, known for working with Zack Snyder a lot, but also working on that movie Zack Snyder did with James Gunn, the Dawn of the Dead remake. The score is fun, but not spectacular, the main attraction being the tie-in album, or Awesome Mix Volume 1, a plot device in the movie they also turned into a merchandised album. Featuring no original songs, only a jukebox of 70s pop hits, including, in numerical order, Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede, Go All the Way by the Raspberries, Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum, Moon Age Daydream by David Bowie, Fooled Around and Fell in Love by Elvin Bishop, I'm Not in Love by 10cc, I Want You Back by the Jackson 5, Come and Get Your Love by Redbone, Cherry Bomb by the Runaways, Escape the Pina Colada Song by Rupert Holmes, Ooh Child by Five Stair Steps, and Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. It's a great album, end-to-end bangers. I had this album in my first car as a teenager in the small local theater a friend of mine worked at, with his now wife, would run this soundtrack exclusively during their hours of operations. Possibly the only CD they had there, but it was all bangers, so I probably have more nostalgia listening to this mixtape of 70s hits, adding up the marquee and posters with my friend or just smoking pot in the theater, than I actually did with it in the film proper, though I already liked it quite a bit. Those were some good times. This film had 3 editors: Fred Raskin, known for working heavily with James Gunn and Quentin Tarantino, training under Tarantino's original editor, the late and great Sally Menke; Craig Wood, who works all over Hollywood for giant franchises like, well, Guardians, but also Pirates of the Caribbean, and most recently Kraven the Hunter. Finally, Hugh Winborn, who worked all over Hollywood, though his output slowed over the years, had been working since the late 80s. The editing is always good, tremendous action editing, and the CGI is well integrated with the live action. Nothing really new to say here for the MCU, but it was a solid team working on this film and made it into what it became and did a good job. Ben Davis did the cinematography on this movie, known for movies like Kick-Ass, Layer Cake, Doctor Strange, and, Kraven the Hunter. Apparently that film was sniping a lot of talent from this one. Though, to Davis's credit, this film looks pretty good. I will say that it's very CGI heavy, so it's hard to say what is post-color correction and effects work, but the lighting and shot composition is unique from the cookie-cutter Avengers franchise style. This style, however, would get a bit more boring as time went on, and any cosmic projects in the MCU started using this look, but at the time it was unique, and I won't take that away from Davis. It is visually appealing, and I enjoy how it looks, despite the fact that Marvel might have kind of beat this horse a little too hard in recent years. The end credits show the return of Groot in a scene where Baby Groot, the proto-Baby Yoda, dances to I Want You Back by the Jackson 5. It's cute and adds to the hopeful ending, teasing that Groot, a soon-to-be fan favorite, would indeed be back for more adventures with the Guardians in his new form. The second shows the Collector sulking about his destroyed collection, with Howard the Duck making a gag appearance after Cosmo licks the Collector's face. It's cute like the other scene. Neither really show any crazy cliffhangers, but I like these. I almost prefer this type of end credits scene anyhow to the more like, here's 2 seconds of whatever character's gonna show up in the next movie. Guardians of the Galaxy is a very good film and made James Gunn a named director who would eventually elevate his career to creatively heading the DCU, the upcoming reboot of the DCEU, starting with his own Creature Commandos TV show and going into his film reboot of Superman. Guardians is a weird mix of being a unique and derivative space opera, taking tropes people loved, remixing them and seeing James Gunn make them his own. This film would lay the basis for Gunn to become the next hotshot filmmaker that seems to never miss and just constantly has an eye for elevating these superhero films to higher, more human levels than many filmmakers manage to, becoming an asset to Marvel till he wasn't, but I guess his tale of being cancelled upwards is more of a story for Guardians 3's development, so we'll come back to that eventually. Probably not anytime super soon though. So, just be patient for now. Guardians of the Galaxy, this random little movie about some obscure characters, made $773 million off of a budget of $232 million. The budget is definitely over what was intended, but considering this is the genesis for the Guardians as a merch-selling giant, it was probably well worth the additional cost. Plus, almost $800 million on a film starring a bunch of goofy, unknown characters is almost unthinkable. To put that in perspective, Captain America the Winter Soldier made less at $717 million, about $55 million less than this film, just showing the power of word of mouth and the MCU brand as it kept gaining popularity and strength, film over film. It's almost unthinkable how well this film performed back in the day. On Rotten Tomatoes, this film did well, with a 92 out of 100, and Metacritic giving it a 76 out of 100, being incredibly well received for a film in this genre. The film was nominated for 2 minor Oscars, but 82 total awards across recognized award shows, 22 of which it took home. Basically, it wasn't considered the film of the year, but it did very well, and naturally led to the Guardians of the Galaxy to have a place chiseled for it in wider pop culture and the Marvel Cinematic Universe cycle.